Rising inflation impacts supply chains. Growth drives new demands for cobots. And a shift in robotic final mile delivery. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome to the 300th episode of our podcast. Logistics Matters is sponsored by ID Label. As second half warehouse projects start ramping up, now's the time to make sure your facility is ready to perform. From durable rack and pallet labels to cold storage solutions, floor striping, and professional installation, ID Label helps warehouses stay organized, accurate, and operational. Visit idlabelinc.com to request your free sample pack today. ID Label. When they do the barcodes, you can do more. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, new inflation reports came out this week showing that last month we reached the highest inflation rates over the past 3 years, and even higher percentages when it comes to transportation cost increases. To help us understand just how inflation affects our supply chains, we join senior editor Ben Ames and today's guest. Ben?
Thanks, Dave. That's right. We've seen inflation start to creep up again this year. That's tough on consumers, of course, because nobody likes rising prices. But it's also tough on businesses because it squeezes their profit margins by making it more expensive to operate. The latest numbers that we saw came out from the federal government on Wednesday, which said that inflation had risen in May from 3.8% to 4.2%. But aside from the numbers, what is the impact of this trend on supply chain operations in particular? Here with us today to discuss that is our guest, Andrei Quinn-Barabanov, the supply chain industry practice lead at Moody's. Welcome, Andrei.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Dave.
First off, Andrei, could you just give a quick description of Moody's and what role you place in the supply chain sector?
So Moody's is a large risk assessment company. I think that's, at least from my point of view, a good way to describe us. And we specialize in supply chain risk, among other areas, and that's the area I work in. So my personal specialty is all sorts of risk around supply chain, and that's my background as well.
Got it. Oh, well, you've had plenty to talk about lately then. So let's talk about this inflation. As I understand it, one of the main causes of the inflation that we're seeing is the super high gas and diesel prices that's been caused by the Iran war and the blockage of oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. Is that about right?
Yeah, and I apologize for those of you driving to a nice place for the weekend because I'm sure gas prices is the last thing you want to be reminded of, but yes.
Now, as you said, whether you're driving somewhere for the weekend or particularly for supply chains, that fuel is absolutely critical since supply chains all comes down at the end of the day to moving goods from point A to point B. And really, a part of the inflation report this week was that the CPI for transportation goods and services rose almost 10% from May last year to May this year. How big a deal is that sort of change in supply chain operations?
It's big, and it's not an overstatement. When you think about just the importance of transportation in the U.S. economy, it is very significant. About 6.5% of the U.S. economy is transportation of all kinds. But that gives us a feeling for the magnitude of the problem. So when a major input, and of course, fuel is a major input into transportation costs, when such a major input goes up so significantly and so fast, that has an impact on almost every business.
It really does. So, as it impacts those businesses, do you have a sense for how they handle the extra cost? Does it just as I mentioned at the top, cut into profit margins, or does it get passed on to partners, or does the increased cost get passed on to consumers, or do you have any feeling for how that filters through?
Well, it's definitely all of the above. On the supply chain side, it depends what relationship you have. We have your suppliers. If you have a long-term kind of strategic relationship, it's likely that the cost gets split, the extra cost between customers and suppliers. If it's more of a one-off kind of relationship, then customers often have to kind of swallow most of the cost increase because they cannot fall back upon the importance of the relationship to the supplier. And on the consumer side, well, it depends on price sensitivity of consumers to what you're selling to them. But most businesses have to eat a big chunk of additional transportation costs.
Understood. Yeah. So we've been talking about, supply chain businesses in general. Are there certain parts of the sector that get hit harder than others by rising inflation and fuel prices?
Yeah. So I think grocery stores are very hard hit. They're notoriously low margin as a business, and low margin is being offset by the fast movement of goods. And when you have a fast movement of goods, you also then have a significant transportation cost. So I think grocery stores, particularly on the West Coast, where fuel prices are particularly high, those have been hit hard. Also farmers, and maybe even less in the US, but globally, which will have an impact on food prices around the world. Farmers have been hit hard because in addition to the transportation costs, which is, I guess, the focus of our conversation, fertilizers have really been affected as well because a big chunk of them comes from the Persian Gulf. And so that has driven worldwide prices of fertilizer significantly up, affecting farmers around the world. So those are kind of couple of examples of the sectors that have been hit very hard.
Interesting. So, to circle back a little bit, we talked about the different ways of sharing the increased price, either with partners or swallowing it. Are there other things that Moody's has been talking with its clients about strategies that supply chain companies can do about inflation issues?
Yeah, so there is the short term here and the longer term. So the short term, I think a room for maneuver for most companies is very limited. One very good exercise to go through is optimizing transportation expense. So companies should look to consolidate deliveries and shipments. It's a good cost management measure in any time, but it's particularly important now. So that's a very good near-term measure to take, and it will have a near-term effect. But most of the benefits will be from longer-term actions, and I'll highlight a couple. One is proactive risk management. So if you have good analysis on the trends in oil price, for instance, we could not have predicted the jump in oil price because of the start of the war in the Persian Gulf, but there are some high quality forecasts for oil price for the rest of the year. And so if you incorporate those forecasts into your risk management planning, you will likely save the company significant amount of money. And then another a very important area is supplier relationships. If you emphasize longer term supplier relationships, you will be more successful in cost sharing, as I've mentioned. That's another area to look at going forward.
Those are some great takeaways. Thank you. Andrei, we really appreciate your taking some time to join us this week and talk about this part of risk that you track, the rising inflation. We appreciate your being here.
Sure. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Our guest this week has been Andrei Quinn-Barabanov from Moody's. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Andre and Ben. Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Victoria, labor challenges over the past few years have led to steady growth in robotics use in warehouses and distribution center. And you wrote this week into some new research of the driving demand in the cobot market.
Yes, I did. That's right. So the market outlook for collaborative robots remains really strong, especially as this type of equipment advances to accommodate heavier duty use in warehouses around the world. This information comes from a report released a couple of weeks ago by the high-tech market research firm Interact Analysis. Now, collaborative robots, or cobots, as you correctly noted, Dave, are robots that are designed to work with and alongside humans. For me, the most common picture that comes to mind in the warehouse are those collaborative mobile robots that travel through the aisles to assist with picking. They help reduce worker travel time and they essentially speed the picking process. And warehouse operators really like them because you can easily scale up and down to meet fluctuating demand and peak season activity. Well, as proof of how much those warehouse workers and managers like these machines, shipments are predicted to grow at an average annual rate of more than 17% between 2025 and 2030, according to the report. And if you look out over the entire forecast period, those shipments are set to double from where they are now.
And Victoria, you said that there's demand for more heavy duty use. Can you share some details about what's involved with that?
Yeah, that's right. So there seems to be growing demand for cobots with higher payloads. Traditionally, cobots have focused on light payloads of about 10 kilograms or less. That's about 20 pounds or less. But the market is increasingly expanding into the 16 to 20 kilogram and even greater than 20 kilogram segments. And that's really blurring the lines between what we think of as cobots and more traditional industrial robots, according to this report. So I think we can expect to see some changes in that regard alongside the growth in demand. But again, overall market demand for all types of cobots, whether the traditional lighter duty ones or the more advanced versions, is being influenced by a few key factors. The first is large-scale equipment upgrades in the electronics manufacturing industry, so we're seeing a lot of demand there. Cyclical recoveries in the semiconductor industry. And the last, which is our focus, is increased automation penetration in logistics and warehousing. And we can all attest to the growth that we see there. Regionally, China leads the way in cobot shipments, followed by the Americas, and then Europe and elsewhere.
Right. And as we've seen with other automation, companies are finding new uses every day for cobots. And I think that's just going to continue to grow as these technologies help distributors address those growing distribution challenges that they have.
Yeah, I think so. Robotics companies and the warehouse users themselves are coming up with new applications for their robots all the time.
Right. Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
And sticking with the robotics theme, Ben, you reported this week about some robots being used in last mile delivery operations.
I did. We talk a lot about robots in logistics, as Victoria just was, but usually, as in her piece, it has to do with material handling tasks within the warehouse, which is a somewhat controlled, somewhat predictable environment. But completing the delivery of last mile fulfillment to individual customers at their homes or other locations in the wider world is a more complicated task when you consider busy sidewalks or crowded roads and rude drivers and red lights and bad weather and all these things. However, some robotic companies have been finding ways to perform in that tough assignment. One of those that has been doing a good job of delivering last mile parcels in recent years has been Starship Technologies. They're an Estonian technology startup that makes autonomous self-driving bots that look to me like a rollerboard suitcase, but it's as if it were laid on its edge, and it's a six-wheeled vehicle. If you've visited any large university campuses in the last few years, you might have seen them driving along the pathways in the college quads, delivering typically small items like coffee orders or e-commerce burrito orders or something. And it's been really impressive. But this week, Starship said that they actually plan to wind down their operations on U.S. university campuses and shift their focus instead to retail grocery chains and hot food delivery in cities across both Europe and the U.S.
That sounds like an interesting change, but why would Starship Technologies actually change their focus if they've been seeing such success on these college campuses?
Right. So two answers. The first one is that the sort of campus application was a little bit easier than driving around the wide world. And so they were able to get a lot of repetitions and prove their technology out. But the bigger answer is margins, profit margins. So Starship says that its robots deliver groceries at a cost that's $3 or $4 lower per delivery than traditional courier fulfillment. So already in Europe, thanks to that kind of dynamic, Starship said that it has reached about 20% market penetration. That's specifically in Finland, actually, meaning that roughly 1 in 5 grocery deliveries in that country is now completed by a Starship robot. So in order to duplicate that success in the US, which is a much bigger place than Finland, Starship is going to redeploy about 1,200 robots from its existing US campus fleet to support American grocery retailers. Who exactly they are, which neighborhoods, which cities, we don't know yet. The firm said that they would announce some specific grocery retailer partnerships in the coming months. But to describe it a little bit more precisely, in the words of Ati Heinla, who's the CEO and co-founder of Starship Technologies, he said that we built something remarkable on U.S. campuses, and we're proud of that work. When we started in 2018, operating in closed, controlled environments was the right foundation. It gave us the operational depth and the real-world delivery data that no lab could provide. Now that we can operate reliably at scale in open urban environments, and that's exactly what grocery delivery demands, Heinla said. So he thinks the technology is mature enough, and they're going to expand to new uses.
Well, Ben, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that those college applications on campuses were a good testing ground for the wider technologies that would offer a lot more growth potential.
Exactly so, a good testing ground for the students and for the robot technology serving them snacks.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Andrei Quinn-Barabanov of Moody's for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder, Logistics Matters is sponsored by ID Label. Planning a warehouse expansion, WMS rollout, or relabeling project later this year? Well, now's the time to lock in your labeling partner before schedules fill up. ID Label manufactures and installs durable warehouse labels, signs, pallet labels, and floor marking solutions built for real warehouse environments. Request your free sample pack today at idlabelinc.com. ID Label, when they do the barcodes, you can do more. As I mentioned at the beginning of our podcast, this is our 300th episode that we've produced of Logistics Matters since we began it as a pandemic project back in 2020. So we'd like to express our thanks to all of the great guests that we've had on during that time and to our sponsors. And most of all, we thank you, our listeners, who keep us going here with bringing you our take each week on what's important in the world of logistics. So thank you. And we'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.